Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to episode 107 on the Healthy Runner podcast, where we help you get stronger, run faster, and become a lifelong injury-free runner. And today I have the expert when it comes to running nutrition with us here to talk about habits we can all make for the new year in 2022 and beyond. Thank you for agreeing to come back on the show, Brooke. I appreciate you being here tonight.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, Brooke Czarnecki is our resident Healthy Runner registered dietitian nutritionist who helps our coaching clients troubleshoot their nutrition and is our resource within our Healthy Runner community. And we are super excited to have her back on the show to share her expertise with all of you listening to this podcast during your runs. Brooke brought the fire last time and some tremendous value. I got a lot of great feedback from your last episode, which was episode 87. For those of you who want to check that out, if you missed that episode, Brooke, talked a lot about and really educated us on underfueling as a runner and actually what REDS is, or RED-S, or relative energy deficiency in sport, and how it can affect our running performance. So if you missed that one, you'll definitely want to check out episode 87 on the podcast. I will also drop the link to that for those who are here on Facebook or on the Spark Your Training YouTube channel. I will definitely drop the link to that one because I got a lot of great feedback, actually, Brooke, from that episode, that it was super helpful. And then we also got into like other topics as well. So even we talked about middle-aged mom runners, right? Like how do you fuel and feel better for your runs if you are pre or post-menopausal? So again, you guys want to get, all of the goodness in that episode. But in today's episode, in today's chat is really going to be about this new year, right? We're still in January here in the new year. And in this episode, Brooke is really going to cover 4 actionable tips that all of us can implement and are going to be nutrition habits that are worth sticking to in this upcoming year. So for those of you who also stick around till the end of this, who are watching this live on Facebook within our Healthy Runner Facebook group, Brooke is actually going to release a very exciting surprise for you guys live here on the podcast. So this is exciting. I'm super excited to hear this news, honestly. And for those of you who are here live, as we move along here on the interview, Brooke is a wealth of knowledge. She has agreed to field any of your questions that you have for any of the tips that she shares or any other running nutrition questions that you may have while we go through this. So for those, Brooke, who are new to our audience, or maybe they're just like stumbling upon this podcast as they maybe searched for like running nutrition habits, possibly, or running nutrition tips within Spotify or Apple iTunes, and they don't know who you are. Can you just share a little bit about kind of who you are and what your background is as it relates to kind of running nutrition?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Dwayne mentioned, my name is Brooke Czarnecki. I am a registered dietitian, and I work primarily with runners. I love working with runners. I'm a runner myself. I've been running forever. Like a tiny fun fact is that I love the half marathon. That's just like a sweet spot for me right now. So that's what I love to do. And back to the nutrition piece, what I love doing with runners is helping them fuel their best and feel their best with running, and honestly just day to day, because runners are very busy people. So that is like my favorite thing to do, make sure that everybody is well fueled, properly fueled. And with that, I always love to cultivate a healthy relationship with food with all of my runners and all of my clients, because that is not talked about a lot in our world. And it's just an added bonus that I like to provide. So a little bit more about me, but I'm super excited to get into this one.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And we're super excited to have you share this topic, because I know this is something that, and I think you alluded to that in your last episode, as far as, having a different relationship with food, right? And thinking about it in a different way, and, not thinking about dieting, especially for us as runners and as athletes. And, we do have to fuel our bodies for the performance goals. And some of us as runners might have weight loss goals, right? And that might be why some people actually started running.
Totally.
So I love, your mindset and all of the tips that you share within our, Healthy Runner Facebook group, and how you've been helping our coaching clients out. I really just love your outlook and mindset in how runners should approach their nutrition as they move forward in their running journey. So let me just give a little shout out, honestly, to people who are hopping on here. We got a lot of our clients hopping on here. So Sue, thanks for joining. Coach Whitney's here. Lindsay, how are you? Thanks for joining from San Antonio. I'll be there soon for conference. Roger, thanks for jumping on here. You are crushing your training. Keep up the great work. Gene, what's going on? Annie's here. Coach Kat's here. Amanda's also here, who's also consistently crushing her training right now. Coach Lewis here. Wow, we got like the coach's corner. We got everyone hopping on here just because they know you're going to be sharing some valuable input. And Christy is here. How you doing, Christy? Yeah, one of your favorite topics is nutrition, Christy says. And Courtney's here. Thanks so much for joining. Courtney's excited to be here, and Adam is here. So thank you guys all for jumping on here. Feel free, like I said, to answer or ask any of your questions as we go along here today. All right, Brooke. So without further delay, let's do this. Let's get into, I know you had talked about, thinking about like 4 kind of actionable tips that you think, runners really need to hear about, and how we can improve our running nutrition habits for this new year. So what is tip number 1?
Tip number 1 is eating consistently. And, I like to keep these tips really simple because nutrition does not have to be complicated, especially like the internet search, like best diet. It's like there will be a million different things. So to make it simple, the first thing is that you must eat consistently. And this is especially important for athletes because we are active individuals. Our bodies should not be going long periods of time without eating. Of course, we have to sleep at night, but during the day, during waking hours, when you are moving, you need to be fueling your body every 3 to 4 hours. That's my rule of thumb. Like, don't go longer than 4 hours without eating. And why do I say this? It's because this will help prevent cravings. So if you find yourself, as one of those, like, oh, I do really well all day, and then at night, I just feel like, all hell breaks loose. I can't, control myself. My willpower goes out the window. That's tip number 1, especially people struggling with cravings, is to fuel your body consistently throughout the day. Don't go longer than 4 hours without eating. And honestly, like better runs, like all of this is related to running, right? So having a more consistent energy supply will automatically make you a well-supported runner when you're out there, burning up all that energy. So tip number 1.
Yeah. So I guess, so from what I heard from you is every 4 hours, right? We should be having something. And what if someone has a really busy job and, they can't, eat a meal every 4 hours? Any suggestions for those folks? I just was talking with a runner just a little while ago who can't do that.
Yeah. It's really, really hard. And if it is like you absolutely cannot, you can't even like run, somewhere, put a couple bites in your mouth, like something is better than nothing. But, if that is you, if you have to go long periods of time without eating, really make sure that you are able to have like really well balanced large meals before and after work. And, try not to skip those meals either. So make sure that you really are prioritizing your meal time before and after work. Give yourself plenty of time to prepare things and have things available to you. But I always try to tell my clients, like, where there's a will, there's a way. If you really want to prioritize nutrition, we should probably try to look at something that you can do, even if it's a small snack throughout the day. That will be better than nothing.
Okay. All right. So eating consistently. If we can't get a full meal in, eat a snack during the day. And I think, as it relates to those snacks or those meals, I think this is a nice segue into your second tip. Which of those consist of?
Yeah. So when we are talking about meals and snacks, I always talk about this concept of balance. So let's talk about snacks in particular, because I think this is a lot of like where I talk with a lot of runners about is with their snacking. So snacking is absolutely okay, and I definitely encourage it for runners and athletes to be able to make sure that they're meeting their energy needs throughout the day. But what I find with snacks is a lot of times they are carb heavy, or they're just only carbs. So, maybe you just have an apple and then you're out the door, or you have, a handful of crackers and then you're like, okay, that's good. So what I always encourage with snacks in particular is that if you are having a carbohydrate, always pair it with a protein and or a fat. And what this does is not only does it help you stabilize your blood sugar, which prevents these really large energy ebbs and flows. So it kind of keeps things a little bit more stable, but it will also help you feel more full and more satisfied in between your meals, because there's like absolutely nothing worse than having, I always use the apple example because it's so true. For a lot of people, an apple just doesn't stick with you. It stays with you for like 15 minutes and you're like, well, what the heck? Like I just ate. So if that's you, try having maybe some peanut butter, adding some peanut butter to your apple, or have an apple with a cheese stick, an apple with nuts. Those are really good examples of some snack ideas to help you not only balance your blood sugar, but help you stay satisfied too.
So the saying is correct, like an apple a day will keep the doctor away, but you need to pair it with some protein or some healthy fats, right? With that apple.
Yes, absolutely. And that really is a big game changer. It's like, kind of going back to what our conversation was before about under fueling, like that can be your ticket to, increasing overall intake and calories and making sure that you're getting enough energy too. So it kind of hits on lots of different things, but.
Nice. Yeah. The apple is definitely my staple for my breakfast during the week, at least. So the weekends, like after a long run, I like to indulge on like nice like egg omelet, and I'll pair those carbs, like you mentioned. I have a nice bagel with that to replenish those glycogen stores. But during the week, it's an apple, and then I will do my plant-based protein with that apple. Always making sure that I pair it, because I did used to notice that honestly before I really started kind of making sure that I followed your tip number 2 here. Is I used to have like an apple for a snack at work. I remember like 15 years ago or something, and I would be like, eat the apple. And I'm like, I'm freaking hungry. Like, 15, 20 minutes later, I'm like, man, I just got hungry. But it's so true. Like you really feel a difference when you are able to pair that with some protein and some healthy fats. So for those of you who, either are having that apple, or I see a lot of people, we snacking, it seems like in the workplace, especially, is like go-to is like pretzels. Yeah. Like people like snack on pretzels all the time. I feel like I've had so many coworkers snacking on pretzels. And, if you never pair that with that protein or fat, like you're going to just be hungry like 10, 15 minutes later, right? It's not going to really kind of stick there. So I think that is a great point. And I've noticed that has been something I've noticed a difference in how I feel, and it's something I'm trying to get my daughters to really implement. It's so hard though, right? Kids, like they just want the carbs, and like I think my daughter like will chase a carb with another carb. Like she'll have like pasta with like potatoes, or like pasta and rice. And I'm like, where's your protein? Like, where's your protein? But for us, kind of going back as like athletes and runners, it's especially important, right? From a recovery standpoint as well.
Totally. Yeah. And there is one exception to that, the pairing, and I almost forgot to mention it, but the exception to not having to pair your carbs with anything is pre-workout. So when we are beginning our workout, we want quick carbs, quick energy. So we don't necessarily want a whole bunch of protein and fat before our workout. One, because it will just sit in your stomach and probably cause some cramps. But two, your body's just not going to use it as efficiently. So the exception to that would be just carbs pre-workout. You don't have to pair it with anything.
Thank you for bringing that up. Excellent point. I know like staple for some runners is they'll do like a smidge of like peanut butter, right? Like on a piece of toast, or with their banana, or apple is probably definitely not the best fruit to have before a long run or a race, just because of the fiber content, but more with the toast. And, the one that is like my staple now is the medjool dates. I've
Yeah.
been doing that a
Mhm.
lot. Honestly, like this morning before my run and then gym workout, like that's been my go-to now. And that's felt totally fine on my stomach. I remember Claire Bartholic shared that on the podcast when she came on to talk about like plant-based kind of fueling for
Mhm.
runners. And yeah, I've liked that one a lot. And it's not so, because I do get a lot of runners too, right? I'm sure you must get this all the time is, I wake up in the morning, I'm not hungry. I don't want to
Mm.
eat before I go out. I can't eat anything. I don't want to eat. And neither did I. But then
Yeah.
once I started just giving a little fuel, especially if you're running for performance and you are looking to actually get in hard runs and quality
Mhm.
sessions, and you're doing speed work or you're doing definitely like your long run, you need to fuel for. That's a definite. But for like the weekday runs, for those who are doing beyond, the easy run, it's so important to fuel. You definitely
100%.
notice a huge dramatic difference in like your output and what you're actually able to do in that workout once you start fueling. So if you're listening to this and have never tried it, don't even trust me, trust the expert here. Brooke's the expert here, right? She's the registered dietitian. Um, she says to do it, we should all be doing it, right? But yeah, I've noticed anecdotally, right? My N of one,
Yes.
I've noticed a huge difference in my performance and how I feel. And even because a lot of times, like you guys know how passionate I am about strength training, those weekday ones I pair with a run. So it's like a long,
A
like
lot.
literally, I was doing probably 2 hours, 2.5 hours exercise today, right? It's
Yeah.
a long time to go without fueling at all, right? And having just everything on empty. And I'm not going to have the energy toward the end of my strength workout that I want to have in order to really push those muscles to where they need to be pushed if I'm not fueled. So yeah,
Totally.
Amanda agrees about the dates. She takes her dates on her runs.
Awesome.
And yeah, Katya says she had date plus peanut balls before my morning run today. Awesome. Nice.
Yeah, those
Good
are so
job.
good. Dates are like candy. They just taste so good. Ah, delicious.
Yeah. And if you don't mind, we do have a question from our
Yeah.
audience. So
Here.
Christy is asking about now that she is in more consistent base training phase of her training as opposed to marathon training that she crushed in the fall.
Hmm.
So should she change her nutrition? Right now she's increasing her weight training or her strength training, but her mileage is lower.
Hmm.
So, would you recommend for someone in her situation, just to, I guess, recap that question for someone who came off of marathon training, now they're base training, their mileage is lower, but they're spending more time in the gym doing strength training? Should the nutrition requirements and demands change?
So that's a great question because it's not a obviously it's not a one size fits all. I wish nutrition was more black and white sometimes, but your body is not going to be using as much of that cardiovascular system, right? So the theory is that you won't need as many carbs when you transition into like a more strength based training program. But then again, I'm not sure exactly how many miles you're doing. Sometimes when marathoners like tell me that they're not running much, like, oh, I'm still running only like 40 miles a week. And I'm like, only 40 miles. So, it really depends on individualized needs. However, I will say that your body demands likely are a little bit less. Now, that doesn't mean that you should be trying to restrict your intake or holding yourself back from certain, foods or anything like that. But I think this is also a really good segue into our third point, which is learning hunger and fullness cues. That really is going to help drive what you need nutritionally, and becoming more aware of your body and what it's telling you, what it needs. But I will say, don't shy away from the protein, especially if you are trying to gain muscle, gain strength. That will become a little bit more important as you move into more strength-based training.
Nice. And would you say the profiles maybe should change, like percentages of carbs and protein in this scenario?
It's not much. It's very
Okay.
negligible. It's not like 20% difference. It's maybe 5 to 10% difference, but it's nothing crazy. And that's kind of like the point I want to get across is that like small shifts, but nothing extreme.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense in my mind, at least from, if you're shifting to more like anaerobic training with strength
Hmm.
training and it's not aerobic in nature, um, that you wouldn't need as many carbs to fuel, right? But I
Hmm.
would think, again, depending upon the strength training that you're doing, if you are lifting heavy, right, and you are
Yeah.
breaking down muscles, then I would imagine the protein requirements may increase a little bit. However, if someone is marathon training, they're breaking down a lot of muscle too, right? So they're going to need
Yes.
that protein for like the rebuilding as well. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to kind of think about. So I guess in summary, you would say maybe a slight shift in
Slight shift.
in
Yeah.
yep. Okay.
But it
Mm.
shouldn't dictate, you shouldn't be, restricting certain things or, not eating certain snacks or meals because of your shift in training. So just that you're using different body systems, which honestly, sometimes that shift is like a shock to the body and you just need a lot more than what you might think you need because your body's just working a little bit harder, right? So, yeah.
No, that makes sense. Okay. Awesome. Christy says thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
all right. So we're down to the fourth tip already. Last tip, right?
Third tip.
Because
Third
well,
tip.
the third tip. Oh, sorry. I thought you gave the third tip away already. Yeah, let's get into that third tip. You talked about kind of hunger, fullness cues. What does that even mean?
Yeah. So,
Is
we
that like
all
getting
think of like
hangry?
grumbly stomach, like emptiness feeling in the stomach, right? Is like typically how we think of hunger and, fullness. A lot of times I find that athletes just know both the extremes of the hunger and fullness scale. They're not really sitting in the middle. They're either starving or they're uncomfortably full and they have trouble um, kind of finding that middle ground and finding that place where they're just content and satisfied. And I'll tell you, like learning about your hunger and fullness cues is a total game changer. And it's not as easy as it sounds. And it's definitely not like the hunger fullness diet. So, eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full. There's definitely many, many different layers to this. But what I will say is that hunger may show up for you in different ways than just, oh, my stomach is growling or my stomach is feeling empty. Other signs of more subtle signs of hunger is your lack of focus. Maybe you're losing focus, you're at work and you're like, oh, geez, I just can't stop thinking about food. That's a sign that you're hungry. Another sign of hunger would be start to get a little bit shaky. You feel a little bit weak. Maybe you're getting a headache. You're just feeling you got some brain fog. Those are other signs of fullness or hunger. And then a big one for a lot of people, and myself in particular, is anxiety. If I start to feel anxious and I haven't had anything to eat in a while, I'm like, wow, I think maybe I need to go eat some food. So those are some other different, more subtle signs of hunger besides just that, stomach feeling. Because we know that stress, emotions can play a huge role in how our hunger is regulated. So sometimes we can't rely on what our stomach is telling
Interesting. Interesting. Yes.
us.
And would you say for someone who was having some of those symptoms, almost to like trial that out and like go have something to eat and see if that helps get rid of your headache? Or do you notice that you're able to focus better? And if so, then that kind of confirms essentially that it was some of these hunger things that were kind of causing some of those symptoms.
Yeah, 100%. And I find too that sometimes runners have a hard time even feeling hunger. So, they're like, well, Brooke, I don't even know what my hunger like cues are. And so one of the ways to determine your hunger cues is to start eating on a more regimented schedule. Because I find that the people that struggle with feeling hunger or even noticing when they are hungry is that they're going really long periods of time without eating, or they have been a chronic dieter in the past and they have learned to suppress their hunger cues and not listen to their body. Because there's like this big thing out there that's like, well, if you're hungry, try X, Y, and Z before you actually eat food. And that drives me nuts. It's like, if you're hungry, just eat some food. So, yeah, that's what I'll add to that.
Wow. Yeah, no, that it kind of makes sense, right? In my mind, it makes sense. So hopefully this is making sense for you guys. And I guess, one may pose the question or maybe thinking, but Brooke, like I'm trying to lose weight here. Like, shouldn't I be trying to suppress my hunger and like eat less so I do lose weight?
Great question. Yeah. So
I'm sure you
if
get that a lot.
you 100%, if you are feeling like you have to be hungry in order to lose weight, you're approaching weight loss the wrong way. We've got to find ways for you to feel satisfied and for you to feel like, content and comfortable with your eating, so that because if you're hungry, your body's likely under a lot of stress, and then you're adding running on top of that, and you're just, fast track to injury. So, weight loss should not mean that you are hungry all the time, that you're miserable, you're irritable. There are many different ways for us to, make sure that you are feeling satisfied with the foods that you're eating if you are trying to achieve weight loss.
Great point. And yeah, I love how you how you talked about the little injury as well, because obviously that's what I see on my end. And yeah, just kind of circling back to the initial chat we had in episode 87 about, relative energy deficiency and that being a risk factor for injuries as well. Yeah, I think I can agree more that, the outlook on weight loss, I think, and how you approach food needs to be a different strategy versus just restrict, and don't eat. And that's how I'm going to lose weight. Yeah. So yeah, listen to the expert here. And I think, if you guys think about it, right? Like if you think about all these fad diets out there and these gimmicks and, things that work, or people who try these, whatever name diet you want to, put out there, and they're like, oh my goodness, I lost 30 pounds in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks, right? Like how many of those people actually stick with that, right? And keep that off. And I think that's what we're all about here in our Healthy Runner community, is kind of lifestyle changes, and we're lifelong runners, right? And we want to do this because we love the mental release and, our physical mental benefits that we get from running. And if you're approaching it like, hey, I need to lose some weight, like, okay, that might be true, and you might be looking to improve your health, but there's a right way to go about it. And there's a not so right way to go about it, where you can get short-term benefit, but nothing in the long term. So I think, Brooke's wisdom and expertise here, I think you should really, let it settle in, especially if you are of that belief. And I'm not, pointing fingers by any means, because honestly, that's how we were brought up, right? Like I felt the same way, like going through all high school, college, in my 20s, and was like, how am I going to get lean? How am I going to like trim down and get rid of body fat? And okay, I just got to eat less, right? And I just got to be hungry. I got to like really be starving before I actually eat something. 100%. And, there is a better way. And we know more now with science and research. And, that's what Brooke's education obviously is all about. Just like from an injury perspective, we know more now to treat Achilles, tendon pain or plantar fasciitis is not rest, ice, and stop running, right? Like we know more now. Same thing for weight loss. We know more now. So there are better strategies out there if you are kind of, thinking that is the only way or the right way. So thank you for sharing that. So kind of third tip was learning those hunger cues and fullness cues, and just not living in the extremes, right? Not being like starving. We've all been there, right? You're like, oh my goodness, I am like absolutely starving right now. And I was kind of getting there. Yesterday was my daughter's volleyball tournament. And it was like, we were in there for many, many hours. And I did bring my snacks, which was a good thing. So I did have my nuts and I had my prunes with me. But that didn't last me from when I needed my meal. So I was at that point, and yeah, I think we all have a tendency, right? When we are starving like that too, we definitely overeat because we're like, oh my goodness, I'm so hungry. And is it true? I've heard this before. You tell me if it's a myth. You can like myth bust on the Healthy Runner podcast here. Does it take time for our brain to actually perceive the food that we're actually ingesting into our GI system? And is that like, there's a delay in there in like, we just keep eating because our brains haven't been satisfied yet of knowing, hey, I've gotten enough food. And then by the time like our GI system start doing their thing to like break down the food and with the acids and everything, it's already too late. Like you've already overeaten. Is that true at all?
So there's no like rule, of like 20 minutes, you should wait 20 minutes because that's how long it takes the stomach to catch up. Like there's no specific rule about that. But if you think about like biology and what happens to our body way back, like people are hunters and gatherers. If you go a long period of time without eating, your body's mechanism, it's a safety mechanism for your body to feel safe again. So it's going to overdo it because it's worried about where the next source of food may be coming from. But on like a certain level of, I just went 5 hours or 6 hours without eating. Normally I eat, consistently throughout the day. It's super easy to overeat because again, your body is wanting a quick source of energy. It's wanting quick calorie dense foods to satisfy its need. So it's like a biological mechanism, and it's a safety mechanism for your body. So it's not that you're doing something wrong. It's actually completely expected of your body because that is just how we are biologically. So I don't have an answer for you, but that is my roundabout answer to the question.
Okay. All right. No, it makes sense. And yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it, as like hunters and gatherers. And like, that's how kind of our anatomy, right? It was like programmed. And if you go on those long periods of time, then it's like, all right, like eat what you kill or whatever, the philosophy is, or all right, let's get into this fourth tip here. So what is our fourth tips for nutrition habits, or running nutrition habits for the new year?
So keep it simple and stay consistent. That is the fourth tip, especially with the new year. There's a lot of pressure and influence to try something that is crazy, or something that's like, do this for 30 days and then what happens after the 30 days. So I always tell my clients and runners, whoever asks me, do things that you think you can do and that you can do for lifelong, and pick one thing that you want to work on and really master that one thing before you try to do it all. Because I think that's an easy trap to fall into. When motivation is really high, we want to start something new. We go all in and we do it all. And then we're like, whoa, this is not realistic or sustainable for me. And then we go all out. So, try to find, again, that middle ground so we're not living in the extremes, and keep it simple, honestly.
Keep it simple, stupid, Dwayne. Is that what you said? Yeah, the kiss principle, right? For those of you familiar with that. And yeah, and I think the staying consistent is a little different than the consistency you talked about in tip one, right? Consistency in tip one was more like eating consistently throughout the day. Here you're talking about what can you do consistently for the longevity, right? Or the long run, pun intended, right?
Yes.
What are you going to be able to stick with as part of a lifestyle, as opposed to part of a diet for runners?
Yes, 100%.
Okay. Awesome. No, it's definitely helpful. And I would say, so for those that don't know, Brooke does help a lot of our coaching clients out who are in our Healthy Runner coaching program. And I would say these are kind of the themes, that you have talked to me about and that we've chatted with our athletes about. And I like how you really focus on what's the clarity and like the focus they need right now, as opposed to this, like you mentioned, this huge overall, diet or nutrition change for them, that might not be sustainable for them. And really kind of pinpointing what are the things. But these are definitely, I would say, the heavy hitters in things that have been that we've talked about before. So for those of you who are here on the Facebook Live, feel free to drop any more questions in as we kind of wrap up here, that Brooke can answer for you with regard to running nutrition. And yeah, Brooke, I'm excited for this big announcement. So what is this announcement all about? What's new?
I totally forgot that we were going to talk about that. And I was like, wait, what are you talking about?
You're like, wait, I'm already married. I'm not getting married. No, this is an announcement that you're like pregnant or anything, right? We're not announcing that.
Oh my gosh. So because I've been working with so many of Dwayne's clients, we have started to notice lots of different themes with what comes up for runners, like the most common issues that come up for runners. And really what I wanted to do was create a program that encompasses it all. And if you want to know exactly how to fuel your body as a runner, you're going to want to find out more details about this. And I'd be happy to share you the details after this podcast, or you can drop them off in the comments. You can put details below. But really this is for runners who just are tired of the confusion. They're tired of feeling hungry all the time. They just want to know, like, how do I properly fuel my body? So I've created this resource for you that I'm really excited to share. And, it's like the most affordable way to work with me. And it's because I want to reach as many runners as possible. So super excited about it. I don't want to share much more because I want you guys to be interested and reach out about it. So I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. So this is going to be, like Brooke said, a really efficient way to get into Brooke's mind and get access to Brooke and help on your running nutrition. So if you are interested in doing that and you are here on the Facebook Live, just comment details in the comment box. If you guys are listening to this on the podcast, crushing your run right now, and you want some more help, you liked what Brooke had to say, and some of her philosophy for nutrition for runners, and you want to learn a little bit more about this new program that she's going to be having, just click the link. By then we will have the link in the show notes, and you can learn more, or I guess, how can runners, connect with you, Brooke? What's the best way for people to connect with you if they're listening to the podcast?
Yeah, my Instagram is the best way to contact me. It is at Intentful Nutrition. The handle will be in the notes, but that is the absolute best way to contact me. I'm most active over there, and I love sharing lots of value over there. So I do post really consistently, and I'm always available in my DMs. So I'm very accessible on Instagram.
Awesome. And yeah, you can also find Brooke in our Healthy Runner Facebook group. So she is one of the part of our coaching team within our Facebook group. So you will see her post content in there as well. So you can find her there. If you're not part of our Healthy Runner Facebook group yet, you definitely want to jump in there. So yeah, I'm super excited about this. I think it's going to help a lot of runners, especially as we're kind of, fighting through the winter months here, and, we're not in exactly bathing suit weather yet. So I think this will help keep our focus, right, and get some clarity on the things we need to really be focusing on now for our nutrition, so we can get these things in order before we really jump into like hard race training. For most folks, some people are getting into some of that now, if they have kind of April race on the calendar. But yeah, I think this is going to be super helpful. So just to recap, in this episode, Brooke really shared with us, 4 tips for running nutrition habits for the new year here in 2022. And just to kind of give you a quick recap, tip 1 was eating consistently throughout the day, right? So like every 4 hours you mentioned. Tip 2 was pairing the carb with a protein and or fat, to make sure that we're always combining, not just eating a carb or only eating a protein. Third tip was learning those hunger and fullness cues and not living in the extremes of those hunger and fullness cues. And then the fourth tip was keeping it simple and not making it too complex, and just having a plan that is sustainable, right? And that you can consistently be able to follow through with. How did I do on that recap?
That was an excellent recap.
See, I was taking notes.
You were. I saw you. So if you are listening to this and you're like, this woman sounds a little bit crazy, like these concepts are not what I've ever heard of before. So all of these concepts that I teach to everybody is directly from the Intuitive Eating book. So it's actually not a new concept, but it's starting to take off in these last couple of years with this like mega dieting world that we have going on. So intuitive eating is really all about like rejecting traditional diet culture and learning to tune into your body. So these are where I get all of my concepts. It is research backed. There's lots of research on it. And again, it's what I love. It's my passion, and I love teaching people about intuitive eating. So what this is all about.
I love it. And, obviously, we've already mentioned this earlier, and that's what I love about your mindset. And again, I think that's why you're such a perfect fit for our healthy runner community, is because I think it just pairs well with what we do from like the physical standpoint, and, strength training in order to run, and how we approach injuries. And, we're looking for longevity, and, not just, making you feel better in your, IT band to get you through this marathon, but make you feel better and prevent it from coming back ever in your training, moving forward. And I think, your philosophy on, running nutrition is very similar to mine as it, from an injury standpoint as well. So thank you again for always sharing all the goodness that you share in our community. And thanks for coming on here again on the podcast. For those on Facebook, thanks for hopping on here. If you liked anything, Brooke had to say, hit that like, hit the love button, show her some like hearts, give her a little shout out. Thank her for taking the time to share all that she shares with our community. And thanks for those that are watching on the Spark Your Training YouTube channel and listening on the podcast. Remember, guys, Spotify just added, a new rating system. So if you're listening to this on Spotify, just kind of click over to the show, hit that follow button, and give us, a rating and stars and what you think we do deserve. And I would greatly appreciate it. It would help more runners find all of the great, valuable information that Brooke is sharing with us today. So we appreciate you guys. Remember, every week we go live within the Healthy Runner Facebook group. So if you want to join the conversation and get your questions answered, just like some of our runners who hopped on here today, you can always check us out in the events tab to find out what the next episode will be and all of the guests that we have lined up for you. Any final parting shots, Brooke?
I don't think so. Thanks for having me, Dwayne.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on again. And thank you all. Remember, guys, let's stay active, let's stay healthy, and let's just keep on running into 2022 and doing it with some healthy nutrition. Until next time, guys. Bye.
Bye.